So I think my love of design, creative, and especially editorial and print came from those comic book days and collecting things. But I just had an interest in print, physical, tactile things.
Do you need to be good at art in order to be good at editorial?
Straight answer, no. I can only describe it as like when I was about to go on stage, right, this is funny to think about it. It was almost like a moment where you're like, okay, this is kind of nuts that we're going to be doing this. But you know what, let's ride that wave and see where we go. Just be calm, enjoy it. You got to enjoy it. I don't know how many books that I will ever get to do in my lifetime, hopefully a lot more, but every piece of work that I do, I'm so proud to have it in hand.
Have you ever thought about a career in graphic design? Have you ever thought about a career in editorial? Have you ever thought about going freelance? Make sure to tune in because today's guest, Kieron Lewis, has done all three, who is a well-established freelance graphic designer who has taken the editorial world by storm. And guys, if you're enjoying the content, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share. It does wonders for the podcast. Now enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of What My Best Friend Does, where we talk about what your best friends do because, let's be honest, nobody knows. Today, I'm joined by my best friend, the graphic designer and host, Kieron. How you doing, bro?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Welcome to the show. We like to start with a little icebreaker. What did you want to be growing up?
What did I want to be growing up? I actually want to be a journalist.
Okay.
I know, just put it out there. I used to, I love the idea of traveling, speaking to people. It was either that or a comic book designer, which is kind of in the realms that I'm in now, but mainly comic books in particular. I used to be actively into collecting comic books. Yeah. Do you know, it's so funny as you say that. For some reason, I just got Spider-Man in my head, like the Daily Bugle. I heard that. That Peter Parker kind of flex.
That Peter Parker life. Okay, so you wanted to be a journalist. Then you wanted to be a comic book designer. You've ended up as a graphic designer and host. Take us back through your career journey, like maybe through like your secondary education.
Sure.
Let's go from there.
Yeah. So I went to school in South London, and I would almost say back then the things that I was always interested in was English and art. Okay. Which is kind of, I guess, the journalism kind of comes into play, editorial, and then went to uni. Kind of fast forward from there. And actually, funny enough, before going into graphic design, which is what I got my degree in now, I was studying video game design.
Okay.
I liked a bit of gaming back then as well. Occasionally I can now when I can. But yeah, I used to do video game design for a year. It took me a year to realize this is not necessarily something I want. I enjoy it, but not necessarily something I want to make into a career. Okay. So I decided to then change courses to Winchester School of Art and then get my degree in graphic design, marketing and branding.
All right. You mentioned that you did it for a year. You enjoyed it, but you didn't want a career in it. Are you able to what was it about it that you enjoyed, but you didn't see yourself doing it as a full-time job? Do
you know what? There was a lecturer, I won't say my name, but he was very, I can look back now and appreciate it, but at the time he was quite, think Snape from Harry Potter, quite savage, very to the point, blunt. Literally like that, but Lewis, literally, was just solid. And I think it was more at the very first class we had, made it very clear that this is a very serious course. It's obviously it's game design. People might have the imaginations what that might be, but this is a very serious thing. It counted with life drawing. We had animation class, 3ds Max as well. And the more I started to do my own research, even though the research before getting into the course, I started to look into. My brain was almost skipping ahead, fast forward 3 years from now, in that seat, in that class, and thinking, when I graduate from here in this degree, do I want to be doing a career in this job? And as much as I love playing games, I love how games are made, I love editorial, I love print, I love magazine. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, from very, very young. It was something that it took me a year because I basically got to that year mark where I had to find another course. I found another course, fortunate for me. And I changed and then got into graphic design at Winchester.
And what's that process like? Because I think there are some people, they go to university and they think, I'm stuck in this course for 3-4 years. You might be the first person that we've had on the podcast who you've done it for a year, you've pivoted. Can you just talk to us a little bit about what that process looks like. So you've gotten to the end of the year. You've obviously had to change university. Yeah. Is it something that, knowing what you know now, you would have done again?
100%. I think I'm glad. I mean, going back to even like family, my parents are quite, they're very supportive. So when I told them, this was, bearing in mind, the course is 3 years. And I would say it was almost like 2 or 3 months into that course where I was like, even that first class was pretty savage. I had a bit of doubts and I thought maybe I can just firm it, see it through. Yeah. But then I kind of think to myself, no, do you know, I do want to do editorial and I'm not going to sit here for 3 years and that's a solid amount of time to take out of your career. What I did do is that I was looking around at other universities that's fairly close by that would cater for what I wanted to do. Okay. And Winchester's not too far from Southampton. So I had my interview at Winchester, had my portfolio, I got through, but I remember I still had a few more months left at my game design course. So, and this is me being very transparent, I felt I kind of got into a bit of a lazy mode because I knew I was changing courses. I'm basically here for 3-4 months.
Here for a good time, not a long time. Am I right?
A little bit. I mean, bear in mind, this is like, 21-year-old? No, not even 21. I was younger, like 19.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a good time. But that also made me think, okay, when I get into this course, this new one I'm in, I'm going to go in. I'm going to go hard because I took a year out. Well, basically not a year out, but, I thought, I don't want to do this again. I want to make this work. Yeah. And maybe I needed that shift into Kieron, make this work now because the first year you have it in a career you don't want to be doing. So yeah, I kind of went into like proper full mode when it came to my first year at Winchester.
Okay, sick. So the first course was in game design. The second course was graphic design. It seems like you've always had like a creative mind, shall we say, or creative passion. Where do you think that creative passion kind of stems from?
Do you know what? It's definitely not family because my mum is a probation worker and my dad's a lawyer. So it's all law orientated. And I don't know. I mean, I can only think back to, we mentioned comic books, right? For me, it was like The Simpsons. So back in the day, you get the Simpson magazines. I remember I used to cut them out and almost like make my own comic book, like almost like collage based. And I don't know if it was from those days where I was collecting things and cutting them out and trying to make my own. But I just had an interest in print, physical, tactile things. And bearing in mind, this was, we're talking, late 90s, right? So, technology, internet and stuff,
Not really there.
Not really. So it wasn't like I'd be online and I'll be making stuff on Photoshop or anything like that. It was all very physical. So I think my love of design, creative, and especially editorial and print came from those comic book days and collecting things. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where I think it stemmed from, and also watching cartoons as well. I love watching cartoons too. Yeah.
So you transfer from the first course. You start in graphic design, and like you said, okay, now I'm here. I'm going to take this seriously. How did you find that second course?
So I went basically a first year again. So literally first year in Winchester. It was. I felt like I was home. I feel like this is what I want to be doing. I also had that mindset of I've got to make it work too. So maybe I just had an extra drive. But something that made it even more homely for me, I guess, was that I met 3 other guys on my course and we were all from South London, which helped a lot because Winchester, if you've ever been to Winchester, anyone's listening and watching and haven't been to Winchester, I can only describe it as like kind of Hogwarts-like feel. Now, I grew up in Brixton, South London. You can be any more different if you try in terms of the spectrums. And when I met these guys in my course, we vibed well. We had certain, culturally different, quite similarities as well. And we kind of wanted to work on a magazine together that we knew that would work and connect other creatives together. So we both worked as a team. We created a magazine in first, second, and even into our third year that we did separate to our uni degree. So we were doing it as like a side hustle, side project. And that, I would almost say that was almost a catalyst for when I graduated, to have a piece of work which you'd done, which wasn't necessarily given by the lecturers, but you did it because you wanted to do it. And that made a big difference.
What was the magazine about?
Yeah, it was called Plog Magazine. And the idea is paper and blogging. It's a bit like a Tumblr. Okay. And you get folks in our course, in our year, and sometimes out of the uni, that would feature work on like a Tumblr. And in the best work we could find, we filtered that down into print. So we would make, hence, paper blog, Plog. And it was wicked because, like I said, 4 guys, 3 of us lived together as well. So that helped as well. So we were vibing as well, playing FIFA, doing design work, going to uni together. But what made it even more sweet was that we're all learning together at the same time. Yeah. You know, it's not like we were all established creators or, you know, we were doing things, you know, that we felt was right for them to do. We had the lecturers who helped and support us. We got sponsored from the uni.
Oh, wow.
So that helped financially to print, because obviously these things are not cheap. So we got financial backing from the uni. And then, you know, we stopped in our third year because obviously third year of uni is crunch time. But from the back of that, we made, I think maybe 6 or 7 issues we did. You know, we would have someone that would be featured as a cover artist. We met so many creatives from our uni, different disciplines, but also other unis.
Yeah.
And that was just, I can't describe how amazing that feeling was to create something because you enjoy it, something that's tactile, something that I've always going to have with me. But more importantly, something that I didn't know looking back now would be the catalyst into where I'm at now in terms of making books.
That's sick. When you did those prints in years 1 and 2, did you sell them?
Yeah. So
okay, so it was like a money maker as well.
Well, do you know
not
what?
Money maker,
no. You've got to make a fee. But I mean, bearing in mind, like I love shows like The Apprentice. Yeah. I'm not gonna pretend we weren't making $1 million, but it wasn't. It was more. Basically, we made ends meet. Like it wasn't like we made a massive profit, but we didn't lose either. And I think that was the we had to be smart with what we're doing because obviously bearing in mind we're dipping into our own pockets. Yeah. And there was that element as well. But because we had sponsorship from the uni and also from the printers as well who helped print it, they had an advert in the magazine. That helped as well financially to kind of shave off some of the costs.
But it showed you that there was a way to make money doing what you loved,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, sick. So we go through university. My first question is, as you get towards the end of your university, are you clear on what is the next step? Like, are you doing an internship, an apprenticeship? Like, what happens next?
So I'll put it out to be very transparent. So at the time, someone I was seeing, her dad had an advertising agency in London, in Barbican actually. Now in my third year of, I think it was second year of uni, I was doing an internship there every summer. So my summers I was there. So summer second year, summer third year, I was doing an internship at an agency called Love Europe, which is an advertising agency. And when I graduated from uni, obviously they had known me, I had known them, had a bit of family connection as well because my partner at the time. And that was my first job out of uni. I was quite fortunate because they knew me already, I had a vibe. I was basically straight into that job as a junior designer when I graduated. So I kind of skipped out the kind of rat race of graduating and then finding a role because obviously what I had the internship, which it was a very different ball game in terms of what you do at uni to when you're in the working world, right?
Wow.
So that was a bit of I think the trial by fire was probably more when I left that job because that job I had after uni obviously is a bit of a safe haven because I know them already. I was already there for most summers. But it was the second job I had where I didn't know anyone. It was almost like, now this is the real. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
So my first question, you mentioned the fact that you missed like it was a trial post uni. Did you feel like your course prepared you well for working life? Is it worth the price of admission, especially nowadays? Yeah. You know, without giving away your age, I'm sure that it's like it's like triple the price now.
It's so true. That's a very good point.
Like, do you feel for any aspiring, creatives and graphic designers who are potentially looking to go to university that the course is worth the money?
It's a trick. I mix reviews on that. I think yes, predominantly because there's elements of, for me, when going to uni is not just about the skills, right?
100%.
The things you get, like the people skills, for example, of being in a space where, especially if you're on campus, where you're mixing with people who you might not necessarily be mixing with if you didn't leave, right? So people from different walks of life, cultures, different ethnicities, all these things play a part. And I was able to get those people skills, which translated into my career, which I worked in advertising back then. And a lot of that was speaking to people, pitching all these elements, which sometimes uni does prepare you for that, but it doesn't always, because there's certain things that can't be taught, if that makes sense. And that just comes down to the person you are, if you're confident, if you're shy, whatever. The skills, yes. I mean, there was elements of things I did in my uni, what I learned in terms of programs, which I had an understanding of when I went into my junior role. But the real McQuay was things like deadlines. It's like the deadlines you have at uni to the deadlines you have when you're in the working world, hella different. Especially advertising, which is why I'll be very transparent, which is why I left the advertising space, because advertising for me wasn't something I wanted to. I was in it, and I got skills, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But I think I saw it as more. It didn't help that I watched Mad Men, to be fair. It didn't help that at all. But in all seriousness, I think it was more that kind of cutthroat, almost dog eat dog, a little bit of that atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were in the advertising world, you mentioned your first role was junior designer. What is it you were doing in advertising?
So I was doing a lot of, back then it was like Flash. So it was like old school digital banner, so like MasterCard. So like MSN, was it MSN? No, Hotmail. Yeah. Those kind of adverts you get on your banner ads. Yeah. I was doing that for MasterCard. I did an advert for Miss Dior as well. So it was as a junior designer, obviously you get given the assets, the content, you kind of make it work, and then you show it to your at the time, because I was junior, I had a midweight. So it goes in kind of levels. So junior, midweight, senior, which I kind of hate hierarchy, but that's a whole different topic for itself. So I would share that with my midweight designer. And like I said, we had a really good, I had a good relationship with all of the people that worked there. So that helped a lot. So that was kind of my role, was to basically do a bit of artwork and, not so much pitching. I had that when I left that first junior role into another junior role. That was, and it was a bigger agency as well. That was a bit more me pitching work and sharing work. And I ended up doing a bit of voluntary work alongside of that, but I'm sure we'll get into a bit more. But yeah, that's kind of what I was doing.
And so yeah, how long did you end up staying in the advertising space for?
It would have been, let's go back that memory lane. It would have been like 3 years of my life in advertising, yeah.
And how, you mentioned Mad Men. Yeah. How is it that, like if you had to summarize the advertising industry, what would be your thoughts?
I don't want to upset anyone in that space. Well, at the time, I mean, to be very transparent and to be real, I was the only, black creative in that space. It was a big agency, but it was a small core team. And in that core team, I was the only person of color. And they made me feel welcome for sure, but there was elements where when we had to pitch to say a wider audience or be in a sort of team meeting, and when you're one, a black creative, but two, a junior, I personally felt that element of not being listened to. Yeah. And that frustrated me a bit. That, my background is Jamaican. I've always been taught from my family and my parents, say what you mean what you say. And I say it respectfully. I always try my best. But there's elements where I would say how I think about a piece of work or why I did what I did, but I wasn't really being taken seriously enough. And that was frustrating. So I did a lot of side hustle jobs and voluntary work. And there's one particular voluntary job that I did with part of TEDx Houston, which I'll talk about shortly. But that helped me, doing the voluntary work and working with a team of folks, helped me to utilize those skills and apply it into the advertising space and then more into my freelance, what I'm doing now.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. So you said that you were the only person of color in the core team. My first question is, why do you think that was the case? Do you feel like graphic design is just not something that is spoken about in African households, Caribbean households? If you had to take a guess as to why you were the only person, why do you think that was?
It's tricky because there were, people of different ethnicity there, but it was more, they were more senior levels. Okay. There wasn't anyone of junior level. Okay. So it almost felt like, I don't know what their background particular was in terms of their history of education or whatever, but they were already in a position of power in that advertising space.
So people had to listen to them.
Exactly.
Whereas with
exactly.
You, okay.
So being a junior, maybe some juniors who are listening can sometimes relate to that, because being a junior in a, especially in a big agency, not just advertising, but an agency in general, you can feel like you're not being heard, or so there's that element weighing up against you looking different in a space. So I kind of had those two things battling, which it was, looking back on it now, it was mad, because if I went back there now, being a freelancer, a bit more experienced and skilled, I don't think I still want to be back into that space because okay, I'm a bit more sharp with my skills and whatnot, and I know more in the industry and whatnot, but I just remember those experiences and not being pleasant of it. And I'm sure maybe it has changed, but I think there's certain things that just, it will stick with me. So, 100%. Which is why I kind of give talks at schools, universities, and maybe do podcasts like this today and share experiences. Don't go into an agency. No, do you know what? Don't go into advertising. If you do it with chest as well. Like you've got to be, because nowadays, do you know what it is? What I love when I see creatives, right, across the board in terms of, what they ever look like, but they've just when they're young, especially young creatives, going in with no fear and saying what they want to be doing. And sometimes if they're not being heard, they do their own thing. And that's wicked. Like there wasn't many, I didn't see many creatives actively set up their own agencies at a young age. Now there are so many, and it's sick to see.
Okay, and talking about like doing their own thing, you mentioned the fact that whilst you were working in advertising, you'd started doing some side projects. Yeah, do you want to elaborate more as to what those projects were? Yeah.
So the thing that stuck for me was TEDx Houston. So TEDx, you probably have heard of TEDx platform.
Yeah, of course, TED Talks.
So TEDx Houston primarily, it was a team of, crikey, it would have been like 20, 25 of us, ranging from different type of disciplines of work. And what we would do was that it was all to do with the African continent. So we would fly out speakers who were doing amazing things on the continent and fly them to London to share about their experiences of what they're working on. And we would put on an event at London once a year, but have small events building up to it. And we'd be funded by TEDx, funded by other platforms as well. But my role in particular, as part of that voluntary, was one of the lead designers on there. So I was lead designer on the print, and then I had another designer who was on the digital. But bearing in mind, I was doing this alongside my full-time work. And this is the full-time work where I wasn't feeling I was being listened to. So going into a space where there was more, black creatives in this space as well, because it's voluntary and it's about the African continent, it felt like this is my people. Like I felt like I could be
yourself.
Exactly.
And the truest form. Did you feel like it was filling a bucket, maybe that you weren't getting filled at work?
Totally.
How is it that you came to stumble upon the opportunity to be the graphic designer for TEDx?
I saw a Twitter, I didn't even funny because I don't even use Twitter anymore, but I saw a Twitter post out looking for a voluntary role for that. And I remember meeting up with, the two co-creators, Afidiba and Amina. I met up with them it was in Shoreditch, and we had I guess an interview, right? But I didn't want to call it an interview because, when you meet someone, you just vibe, a bit like when we first kind of met, and the energy was there. And basically I ended up getting the role because we had the chat and everything went well. But fast forward, it became like a family. It felt like we're all working together for a common cause. Everyone in this team had full-time jobs or other jobs that we're doing. This wasn't paid. This was a voluntary job, right? So I saw the advert online. I applied. It was basically 3 years of my life working on this parallel to my other careers that I was doing.
Yeah, and you've mentioned, you did this alongside a job. At university, you started a magazine alongside your degree. Where do you feel that passion to do these projects to help fill those buckets maybe comes from?
Do you know what? I do get, how can I say it? Let's be honest. I get bored, I think, quickly sometimes with certain things. So I had to kind of do things that wasn't necessarily fulfilling me creatively.
Okay.
So, uni was awesome, and I am so privileged of uni. But because in a space where, Winchester, I mentioned Winchester, kind of Hogwarts vibe, there wasn't people that necessarily looked a lot like me. When I found these people who I worked on the team with from South London, that was my kind of creativeness fulfilled because cool, we're alike, we're working on a common cause. Same thing in TEDx Houston. I was in an agency, did some really cool work, cool brands, but I still weren't feeling I was really being the most I could be. But when I'm in TEDx now, which is a voluntary thing, I was able to kind of put those skills, and more importantly, if I had ideas, share it, they would listen.
Yeah.
And that gave me confidence to then apply that into my full-time work.
I love it. So I think for the listener, for anybody who, might be studying or working in a place where they don't necessarily feel like they fit in or they don't feel heard, what I'm hearing is go and find a place where you will be heard and where you do fit in, and it will be able to supplement, because you don't want to leave uni again, right? Do you know what I mean? You don't want to leave a full paying job, rather than ending the game and going to start something fresh. It's you found a way to make it palatable, and I think that's the takeaway for the listener, and I love that. So you were in advertising. You've obviously done this on the side. Where do we go to next?
So it's crazy how things are all linked up. But when I mentioned the TEDx and there was a person in that team, Nancy Adamora, who's she's my sister, man.
Shout out Nancy.
Shout out to Nancy, because she's a sick individual. So I always knew, first of all, I wanted to go freelance, right? That was something that stuck in my mind, that it could be cool to one, have flexibility with my career, and two, work with, creatives who, with agencies and clients who have like-minded ethos and do impactful work, right? Mm-hmm. So fast forward to literally the first month of pandemic, in fact, lockdown, I should say. Mm-hmm. I went freelance, which sounds kind of wild to leave a full-time job in pandemic to go freelance. When I did go freelance, Nancy, who I shout out in TEDx Houston, worked at HarperCollins. Okay. And they were looking for a designer for a publication. Nancy put my name forward, I showed some work, I got the gig. And that was my first freelance job, which was basically to create a 300, well, we didn't know it'd be 300 pages, but it ended up being 300 plus page hardback book called Still Breathing, 100 Black Voices on Racism, 100 Ways to Change the Narrative, which solid piece of work.
Amazing. And so when you go freelance, obviously your role is freelancer, but are you freelancing specifically in graphic design? Is it in various aspects?
Mainly editorial. So that was what I kind of wanted to be. It's tricky. When you're freelance, it's very easy to want to be a jack of all trades, especially when it's the first year of freelancing, because financially you got to make sure, there's elements that you got to make sure, you're afloat. And my wife, my fiance at the time, because we were getting married in that same year, which is kind of even more wild.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine pandemic, freelance, wedding, it was all kicking off. I had to, we had a very long chat about this, and, financially we were okay for the next few months. And I thought, what, if we're gonna do it, let's go in and make it and go hard, right? So I knew I wanted to be a freelance, but primarily a freelancer in the editorial space.
And how would you define editorial to the listener? So could you describe editorial first of all, sure, and maybe then describe how it might differ from traditional graphic design?
I would describe editorial as basically getting a piece of artwork, whether it's copy and imagery, and design it in a way that is palatable for the viewer or the reader, I should say. So you design it in a way that's clear and digestible. That's how I always tend to read or when I see content. But you're taking into consideration color, you're taking into consideration font sizes, all these elements which you learn in uni or online or whenever you do tutorials. That's kind of how I would describe editorial design. So mainly working in magazines and books, which is what I do. And how it differs, there's always the argument of print versus digital and all these elements. And for me, as much as I love designing, because I can also do some digital design too, print is something that it's tactile, it's physical. There's emotions you get when you first smell something fresh off the press of a print. If I create a piece of book or a book I make, I'm like a kid at Christmas when it comes in, do you know what I mean? So it feels nice to have something you've done and physical. So there's elements that I think that is quite special to me than to say if I'm designing a digital ad online, which is totally fine, but you can't get elements that you replicate like that.
Understood. A question that I have, do you need to be good at art in order to be good at editorial?
Straight answer, no, I don't think so.
I love it. Yeah. You just need to have an eye.
Do you know what's funny? If you go back to GCSEs, right? I remember dropping this bomb now. So for my English and my technology, we had graphics, I got a B, so I was quite happy. For my art, I got a D, which is wild because I remember that was the first grade. I'm opening my GCSE letter. I don't know why I did bad. It was wild. I remember thinking my life was over when I saw that D. I was like, that was the only D, by the way. Yeah. But still, I like to think I'm a perfectionist. So when I saw that, I was thinking, geez, man, how am I gonna? So yeah, I don't think is always down to that.
Okay, so if it's not specifically down to that, could you elaborate a little bit more on what are the skills that make somebody who's great at editorial?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind before anything is that you've got to be interested in it. I know it sounds really obvious, and you've got the skills, which we'll touch on in a second, but you've got to want to do it. I think there's elements that, if we're going to go back to the beginning of this conversation about me when I was doing video game design, I like it, but I don't want to make it a career. So then you kind of drift out of it. And that's across any line of work, right? So first, you've got to be interested in it. Two, you've got to kind of keep up to date with what's current as well, because things are always progressing, magazines, different types of materials and stocks. Without geeking out too much, I'm into that a lot anyway. So when, for example, the Still Breathing book, the HarperCollins I mentioned, yes, I was designing the inside and the cover, but I was also interested about the materials we would use to actually make the book. So I was sharing knowledge on that, which I don't think necessarily they're expecting me to do, but because I know about it, Well, I like to think I know about it. I was able to put some stuff on the table and it went down well.
Yeah.
So you got to be interested in that element as well.
Okay, I love it. And speaking about the book design for HarperCollins, could you like run us through what a typical day and week would look like when you're helping to design this?
How long we got for the podcast? We're gonna go way over time than we imagine. A typical, I mean, without getting way too off piece, because I will go. Obviously, I've got a child as well, 11-month-old, my little daughter Willow. So life has very much shifted. But on a fairly average day, I will check emails first thing in the morning. I'll go through it. I go on a lot of blogs. I do actually end up going on a lot of design blogs without, I used to be one to go on YouTube, and now I've replaced that, which, it's just fine going on YouTube, but going on the design blogs, see what's currently going on in the editorial space. And then usually I have a lot of client meetings. A lot of my clients now, it wasn't at the very beginning, but a lot now is mainly based in the US. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because I do some other work for Adobe and bits and bobs. And a lot of it is, the print world isn't as big as you might think. And I still don't think that. So when you do a piece of work or a publication, for example, hardback book, and you share that on blogs or with creatives, you'll be surprised how much work comes from people seeing and then wanting to be, this seems all right. Who designed it? And then, so a lot of my clients are now US. So I tend to have Zoom calls, Teams calls, but obviously time difference.
I love that. And you've actually said a few things like throughout the podcast and just like dropped a few nuggets. I think the first one, like you've not explicitly said, you've always had a body of work. So from time when you were younger to like at university, could you talk about the importance of having a portfolio and keeping that up to date?
So important. I think I've always, even when I think back to my, full-time, design days, when I saw portfolios that came in, the things that stood out for me is the type of work that people do that's separate to what they've been told to do. And that makes a big difference, right? So if you're doing collaboration projects or projects with your friends or with family or with just by yourself, get those in your portfolio. I'm not saying that's the whole reason why, because obviously you want to, name drops or, name brands, that helps, of course. So you have other clients or your university portfolio work. But when you put in little gems of projects you've done, like for example, when we did Plog, I put Plog in my portfolio, and that was more of a conversation starter when I was going for jobs than actually some of the other client-based work as well, and they're bigger brands, right? Because I think folks could see, I'll tell them what I did for that client, ABZ, whatever, ABZ, but it was more when they asked me about the side hustles and I showed them the Plug, for example, I think they could see this guy likes what he does in this particular work, and I did, and I do. So yeah. And
then where did I want to go from there? So you spoke about like taking the plunge and going freelance during the pandemic. Was that a decision that was enforced by the pandemic, or was it a decision that you made on your own, is my first question. And then second question, like how is it you went and sourced clients, right? You mentioned HarperCollins. What happens off the back of HarperCollins?
So first question, well, I remember, so I'm a person that overthinks a lot, right? And it's funny because even before pandemic, I wanted to go freelance, and I had moments where I was gonna do it, but I was very hesitant, super hesitant.
What is the attraction of freelance?
The attraction is that you're able to be flexible with clients you work with. You're able to, you are your own boss. You can work on a project, you can work as much as you want, I wouldn't say as little, because actually when you're freelance, you sometimes tend to work even maybe more because you're worried about the what if I have a few months that's dead and quiet, how do you survive and sustain life? So there was elements of that. But I remember having a very serious conversation with my wife now, and she, we kind of weighed up the pros and cons, and there was much more pros than there were cons.
Okay.
And, I'm quite, I think, pragmatic guy. And when I saw that, I thought, you know what? Worst case scenario, if we do this freelance and we try and make it work and it doesn't work after the first 5-6 months, financially, we've got, the mortgage is covered, we're good. I'll try and find a job back in full time if I can. He says so easy. He says so easy like it's that cash. But then to be fair, I like to think I'm being proactive since then. And that was 3 years ago. I've been freelancing now. It's 3 years now? Yeah, it'd be 3 years. It's wild to even think that. Because pandemic.
So to anybody who is in a job and thinking about going freelance, or just in general looking to go freelance, what would your key consideration or piece of advice be to them?
The first one is, and this is not even related to design or anything, just like the reality of life. Like, what is your personal situation? Is this something that, if you're at home, are you still at home with your parents? Because if you are, then at least financially you can maybe make this work, and that's okay. In my situation, I had a mortgage, right? We're getting for a wedding. So there's elements of like evaluating your life situation, because freelance, as glorious as it looks from the outside, it can be very difficult, right? Super difficult, especially the financials. And there's a big deal. So there's checking out your financial situation, making sure you can sustain yourself, a few months. The second one, and this is a really obvious one, but getting an accountant. I like to think I'm good with money, but an accountant will make your life hella easy. Tax isn't something that's fun to figure out, right? We've all got to do it. We've all got to pay it. So I've got an accountant. So these are like more like the logistical things.
No, but I think these are key takeaways, right? Because I think people get into this stuff and then they don't realise. And then, like you said, like all of a sudden something that looked glamorous, maybe it's not so glamorous because you owe P's to the tax man.
Of course.
The clients aren't clienting. Like,
they are not.
Sometimes you just want to, I want to be sure to do justice to it before people, consider taking the leap, because it is a big leap.
Massive, yeah.
But, for all of the stuff that we've said, potentially could go wrong, when it does go right, like it has in your case, you've been doing it for 3 years, it does go very right? And like you said, you've got flexibility, you can pick the clients who you work with. Are there ever situations where you like see a client and you're just like, you know what, I'm not going to work with them because they're moving somehow? They're
moving shift. I'm so happy you mentioned that, because I've given talks at unis about this very same topic. Because so when I went freelance, it was during and this is why we made the Still Breathing book, HarperCollins. It was a response of the George Floyd killing in the US.
Yeah, wow.
And there was a lot of brands, publishers wanting to work with black creatives because of what they were seeing in the papers and media. Now, it wouldn't be professional of me to obviously name drop, but I had one or two, especially one in particular I can remember, but they reached out to work on a book as a black creative, but it didn't sit right with me, more so because it felt more
like a tick box exercise.
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. The content was decent, but maybe it was the people skills of how they came about it via email and the way they approached it. And we had a Zoom call. And I'm a big guy on like vibes and energy, right? Because especially when you can't meet in person, grab a coffee, it's all online because there was something that just didn't sit right. It didn't feel like the correct thing to do. And sometimes, and let's be real, you get a job that comes and financially you have to take one for the team, and you do, because let's not be
the bills need to be paid.
Of course, realities. Yeah. But then there's moments where it's like your ethos. That is so important. Being known for the type of work that you want to be known for, and just things that sit right with your heart. Like, and I'm not being cheesy about it. Like, I generally mean that. So there was a lot of brands I was approaching, like I said, two in particular, and one I should say, was where it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. And you're questioning certain things that they didn't have the answers to. And it's all because they just didn't know that I would answer those kind of questions. So, yeah.
So to answer that, you would turn it down.
I did.
Okay.
No, I did. Yeah, no.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah, no, I did. Of course. Yeah. Okay, now it's funny because now 3 years down the line, like, you Google my work or whatever, I think I'm kind of known for a lot of my work touches on race, design and communities. A lot of publications I've designed and been, privileged to work on that touches in this space. And I think that's because of 3 solid years of like working on types of work that I want to be known for. And rather than drifting off into something I don't want to be doing just because it pays the bills, when you try and keep to what you want to be doing,
you become known for it.
Yeah.
And then you can do the stuff that you want. Sick. And yeah, just going back to what I was saying before, like in terms of sourcing clients, winning clients, is it inbound? Is there some outbound? Is it word of mouth? I know your first one was word of mouth. To any potential freelancers, looking for their ways to source, what would your advice be?
Do you know what's it's funny? I always say, even when I give talks at unis, the back in the day of like reaching out to a client or publisher to want to do work via email, I think is long gone. People, I got a job once actually with Penguin actually. I'll put it out there, and I got a DM from the creative director at Penguin on Instagram. Now that seems kind of, obviously we took it to email, but it made me start to realize first of all, I had to check their profile, make sure it's legit. Like, it's not like it's a, you know, like
I'm an African prince.
Just send me your sort code and account number, innit? I will be there, innit? Like, it weren't like that. Like, they were legit, they were real, and I was like, it hit me. I was like, the days of actually approaching someone just via the generic email, it's people do, of course they do, and that's, you keep it professional, always do. But there's various forms of reaching out, and that's where I started to really think how different our industry is shifting and changing. Because let's be real, I think they reached out to me because I'm active on Instagram, active on LinkedIn. That's probably the quickest way you can find me, to be fair. I'm on emails too, but they got me a DM. I saw that straight away.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta keep it. I don't want to be like too hungry and give it a few minutes before you get back straight. But I was like, okay.
Yeah.
They seem real.
And
so,
is that, so you mentioned that you're active on Instagram, LinkedIn. Is that like posting the work that you're doing and making sure that it's visible for your audience?
Yeah, but I've always found, I don't know if you find it as well on social media, but like, I mean, there's a fine line between promoting your work and just spamming people's feed.
Yeah.
And I guess how it works, obviously, if you don't want to see someone, you just unfollow, right? Or you whatever. But I'm always conscious, and I say this to not get too complacent, because where things happen, and, you know, especially in my creative space, I have a lot of friends who are freelancers. I like to see wins, especially, you know, in our community, in the black community. I love to see wins like that for us happening, right? So there's a lot of that out there, but I'm always conscious about how much is too much. Do you know what I mean? So I do post, and it's not always the shiny piece of work I've done. Sometimes, occasionally it's the process, which sometimes rare, and it's difficult because of NDAs and things you can't necessarily share. But when the job is done, I do like to show the process and the things, especially on website, for example. On my website, I've got book covers, but I've also got versions of book covers before we got to that final stage. Oh, wow. Just so you can see, because some of them, maybe a bit cheeky, some of them I actually prefer the versions, but more because there was a process to it, like everything you see online. I think it's easy to, if you're a young creative or graduate, to go on a graphic designer site and see the polished thing and think, they must have done that in the first round. Yeah. Nowhere near, especially in publishing and editorial where it's rounds and rounds and rounds.
Yeah, okay, sick. That makes a lot of sense. And just the final thing on that. So you have your website, you have your, I suppose your portfolio is on your website. Is that like, where people see your work and then reach out, oh, he's done that, so maybe we're going to hire him for a job? Would you say, because I suppose what I'm trying to ask is, for freelancers, going back to the importance of having the portfolio, is that going to be the biggest source of you winning clients? I suppose would be more.
I'd say so. You're having a,
like, if you don't have it, is it long?
It is a bit, because do you know what's funny as well? And I think this has shifted maybe more so during pandemic, where people were at home, people had time just to stalk the hell out of people. I think having a social media presence and having it in a way where you're comfortable with it, not just having it for the sake of having it. I've always been a firm believer in, if you've got 3 projects that you think is amazing and you're very proud of, get those 3 up, rather than just having 5 or 6 that you think is average, but I want to have loads up, because it's all about quality, right? Not quantity. So that is super important. So being known for that is, I always think that's quite important. But also something I've noticed, and I've even seen it firsthand from friends who I have who are in this space, is, you know, creative directors, art directors, publishers, CEOs, everyone does it. People will background check the hell out of you. They will. They'll type in your name on social media. When you get a portfolio, they think they see the website, they will type your name, probably go on LinkedIn, probably go on maybe Instagram, Twitter, and they will check out. So, and obviously, morally, is it right? But people do it. I think people, just the human nature of wanting to see, if I'm going to hire someone, especially if it's a small business, I need to feel comfortable with that person. So you will just, by human nature, check things out, right? And you want to make sure if they're checking out, you know, your online presence is sharp.
Is on point.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're presenting the best version of you.
Yeah, but then also, I mean, I realise that it's all very Black Mirror-ish.
And authentic.
Exactly.
That's what I mean.
It's all very Black Mirror-ish,
right? Not just best authentic version.
You go on Facebook and scroll down me 2000 what I was doing. You don't want to be seeing them ones. But it was more like, you just keep it, because obviously everyone has like fun and whatever. But I think it's more, just knowing that you're keeping it to a level that you're comfortable with, and that someone can search you and you're happy with it. But to be fair, and just to be very super clear, like obviously they should be searching your portfolio, the things you want to be on your CV, i.e. maybe your website, maybe your LinkedIn, things you want people to see and you put on your CV, then they should be looking at that. And I'm hoping they are. But I just think the human nature in us is to still type in your name. Even if it's a mistake, you still have other links that pop up because your name's been searched.
Yeah.
And let's be on so that's what I'm trying to get at. So I think it's just making sure that you keep things that you're comfortable with, your online presence sharp, and then you're good to go.
Okay, sick. Obviously, you're a freelancer. We've kind of covered that. I introduced you as a graphic designer and host. Talk to me about the hosting. Like, where did that originate from? And how did you get into it?
Hosting it's kind of nuts.
And what is it you host as well?
Of course, just randomly saying host. So in that same, this is going to sound freaky, but God's honest truth, the same week I handed in my notice from my full-time to go freelance was the same week Adobe reached out on an email asking me to be part of Adobe Live, which Adobe Live, for anyone who's listening or watching, doesn't know what it is, or for yourself, it's basically a platform on YouTube and Behance which allows a creative to be hosted by a designer and to see their design process. So you work on a project of your choice for up to an hour and a half, and you basically walk through and design live on a stream your design process and hopefully get to the final deliverable. And folks, there's a live Q&A chat. So people are talking to you whilst you're designing.
That's it.
So that was basically Adobe reaching out, which at first I thought, one, this is kind of nuts because obviously I've just handed in my notice literally that week. So I thought you can't really make this up. Two, designing live on a live stream is very daunting because sometimes designing is something that you might want to do behind closed doors. People will see the final thing. That's cool. Yeah. But when it's the process, are people going to judge you? Are they going to... So I remember talking to my wife again and like, it was just like, I think this is a really good shout,
But you don't have to do the designing, do you?
At the time, so I was the designer. I wasn't the host. So this is what I'm going to get up to. So I was the designer and I was being hosted. So I did that. It was a 3-day live stream. So I was the designer being hosted. That went really well. I was really happy with it. And then maybe, I think it was 2 or 3 months later, Adobe reached back out and said, really enjoyed your stream. Would you want to come back, but this time as a host? And now this was 3 years ago. And since then, I could even tell you how many streams, maybe easily like 40 or 45 maybe. So basically I do Adobe live streams hosting. Occasionally I will sometimes go to the Munich offices for Adobe, and then I will do live streams in the studio when they have Adobe Max with a conference usually in LA. We'll be looking at the new programs that's coming out, and I'll be hosting a designer working on the new programs and be that go between the designer hosting and also the live Q&A chat. So that's kind of my role in between, talk to people, but also liaising with the chat as well.
How do you find hosting?
It's much easier than designing live. I'll put it out there. I mean, it's a different type of your brain because something I've learned, and this isn't necessarily, I've mentioned this maybe loads on podcasts, but I think you learn a lot about yourself when you're the host, because even like now, like I realize I'm the one being, which is cool. And you're smart. Like it's weird because I think when you're the host, it's not just a case of you speaking at the person. You're giving this person, a creative, the space to do what they want to do and make them feel comfortable. And not everyone is super comfortable on camera. Yeah. So my job is to try and make that individual feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. I always think the best way is through laughter. 100%. If we have a vibe, that makes them feel relaxed. I feel relaxed. The probably people watching feel more relaxed.
100%.
So that helps as well. And I think I've learned a lot about myself and how I am with different types of people, and then translating that across how I conduct myself on camera and then how I speak to the person who I'm hosting and also the live Q&A chat.
To anybody who potentially wants to become a host, what would your key piece of advice be for them?
I would say it's a tricky one. I mean, we touched on the idea of if you're to be a freelance, what it is, like the interest in it. I think as well, reaching out to folks who are actually actively hosting. It's tricky because if you reach out, sometimes you might not care back, and that's just the reality because people are busy or whatever it is. But there's ways of how you can kind of get into that space, just reaching out on a DM. But also, like I said, I got into hosting simply because I was the designer at one stage. I never thought hosting would be something I would do, not by a long shot. And
how was it when, sorry to jump in.
No, hit me.
When the cameras were there, what was that first experience like for you? Did you remember to look into the camera? Are you looking is there a lot of notes? Did you do a lot of prep to make sure you didn't have to do notes? It's weird because the majority of my streams is online. So if I'm hosting someone, it's I have my split screen. I have my array of mint tea, water, just drinks. I don't get dry mouth. There's all these elements. So there's nervousness every time I go on live. Every time there's a 3, 2, 1, now we're live. Of course, because it's human nature, right? But there's an adrenaline that you get as well. And it's
it's sick because I don't know what the person's going to create and how it's going to look. And for me, I'm also watching this as well, right? I'm watching a live creative create something awesome. So it's the anticipation. It's fun. But when you're, say for example, when I go to Munich offices now and I'm doing the in-person like we're doing now, that's a little bit different because you've got the camera crew behind, you've got the green screen, and like an idiot once I wore a green jacket, like a floating head in this. Yeah, but obviously I changed. I realized that guy from London, innit, had to do that. But I think there's a different element of the nerves, but you kind of just channel that nerves into, it's healthy to be nervous because it means you want to do well.
Yeah, you're on edge. And when you're on edge, you're alert.
You're so alert.
And when you're alert, good things happen because you're sharp, you make jokes.
It's when you're not alert, then you get too complacent and you're like, you look at the wrong camera, dude.
You start yawning, you call your co-host the wrong name.
You're dribbling, you didn't realize you're making a fool of yourself. Just not done that. But anyway,
okay, so obviously we spoke about Adobe Live. You also hosted like an event in front of like 900 people. Was it at the D&AD?
D&AD Awards.
D&AD, sorry, the D&AD.
Design and Art Direction Awards. So that's a platform, charity owned as well, where basically we just highlight creatives and also agencies doing amazing work and championing basic creativity. So they have award schemes, they have work for young creatives coming through. They have, the awards is probably the big thing they're probably known for. If I'm honest, you get like a pencil called a D&AD pencil, which champions creativity, and you have different types of pencils. Now, D&AD, if you're creative or designer listening, you probably know what that is because that's kind of drummed into you when you're at uni, especially like when they have briefs and then D&AD set briefs and then you want to get yourself featured on there and, you know, all these elements. Now, I pitched to basically do some hosting for D&AD. Obviously, I've done some good stuff for Adobe, so they know who I am because they collaborate before Adobe and D&AD, which is cool. I got the gig, and it was last month, May, where I went to do it in person for the festival. So this festival it's at the South Bank Centre, right? So it's not like it's a small little back alley. It's a big deal, and it's Queen Elizabeth Hall. I was on the Queen Elizabeth stage, I should say, which 900 capacity, which, bro, it's a different type of nerves. I mean, it was fun. I think it was more, I can only describe it as like when I was about to go on stage, right? This is funny to think about it. You remember 8 Mile Eminem when he's in the Mom Spaghetti kind of thing? It was almost like a moment where you're like, okay, this is kind of nuts that we're going to be doing this. But you know what? Let's ride that wave and see where we go. Just be calm, enjoy it. You got to enjoy it. Otherwise, why would I be putting myself in a situation like this?
Is there a lot of prep that goes into that?
A lot of prep. Yeah. A lot of prep. I mean, I try very hard not to just be looking down and reading because there's obviously a lot of names because there's a lot of people throughout that. It was a 2-day event as well. So it wasn't just a 1-day event. So from 9:30 to literally 4 o'clock, you're on point because you're introducing people on stage. Wow. It's a lot happening, right? And there's a lot of names of people. And we have different people from all walks of life that have come to give the talks, right? And they have panel discussions. So you have your script, you're doing your prep work. But for me, it was just the names of knowing someone, making sure I get the next, because you don't want to be butchering someone's name before they go on stage. That's awkward for anyone. I had a lot of prep for that. But yeah, I'm glad I did it. It was something that I didn't think I would ever do, but I did it and it was like, okay, cool.
And let's say they have awards next year.
Yeah.
You see, you applied again, or maybe it's a one and done. Like,
no. Do you know what is funny? This is mad, right? For anyone who's listening, and especially for any new dads, I got to throw it out there, right? Because obviously I mentioned I'm a new dad, fairly new, 11 months into it. And I made this joke with my wife, and it's funny because I said if we can do this, having my hardest project right now is having a daughter. Yeah. Right. It's an ongoing project. The hours are terrible. The pay's crap, but it's still amazing, right? But the way I see it is that if I can do something like this, which takes energy, time, patience, then when I'm in a situation where I'm hosting a festival where it's a lot of people, it's a completely different thing, of course, but it's still harnessing energy from within to try and be the best you can be.
Yeah. So
now whenever I do something like this, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Like, I want to do this for me and my family. Like, I've got this. Do you know what I mean? Like, not in a cocky way, but more like I'm going to channel that energy into something positive and we make it happen, make it work. Plus, when I went on the stage, I remember kind of mentioning like I'm a new father, so I got a few R's on stage. So that softened it a little bit before I went. It's like, cool, okay, I think they like me. So now we jump into host mode. So yeah, it was alright.
I love it. You're a man who does a lot. You've mentioned a few times that you also like deliver some talks in schools, universities. Yeah, like how has that come about, and where is it you're giving talks, and what is it you're talking about?
Yeah, so I work quite regularly actually with Blueprint for All, which is a charity which helps and works with a lot of schools and other from underrepresented backgrounds. So that, I mean, that's been a 2-year partnership that we've been doing. And whenever they have events, they basically bring me in to speak at schools or colleges or sixth forms, which for me is so impactful because I'm going back to, school, sixth form days, and I'm going as a black creative, sharing work that I've done in our community and saying it's actually realistic to do a job looking like myself in this space, right? So, not to say when we had guest lectures when I was at uni or even college that people, we had speakers that came in who were of color, but there wasn't many. So that's why when I go back, and because I'm going back to even younger years, I'm talking like, sixth form, maybe even sometimes secondary school I've done a lot of as well, where it's, some of them don't even know what they want to do as a career, but at least they have an idea of this is a realistic job.
For someone who looks like me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you've got no pressure from what your parents might be saying to you, and there's elements of that as well. So when I give talks, I try and, obviously I show my final piece of work, I've done that, but I also have a section in my talks which discuss about the realities of being a black creative in this space and things that you might, not necessarily things that you might face, but experiences that I've experienced. And it's understanding that yours might not be that at all, but at least you can remember maybe something I'm saying that will then help you along your way and your journey. So there's elements of that. But then even with the bigger years now, like universities, that's a bit different because obviously people tend to know what they're doing in uni, what they want to do when they get out. So I've given talks at Southampton, UAL, Camberwell, which is the most recent talk I've done, which was maybe 3 months ago, which was sick because a lot of creatives, I love that because there's no fear sometimes of what they want to ask, especially second years or even first years where they want to go into freelance, but they just think, how do you even do that? Because the narrative always tends to be, I go to uni for 3 years, maybe do a master's, but more or less you graduate, then you get a job and you sit in a full-time job and then you just see what happens.
Yeah.
But there's other ways of getting there. Even uni, you don't have to even go to uni. There's other ways you can self-teach as well, self-taught online or apprenticeships.
Build the portfolio from early, apply with the portfolio, get a job, top up the portfolio,
top it up, side hustles,
repeat, side hustles. Of course. I definitely think that you don't necessarily have to go to university, but one thing I will say about university, because I know I asked you before, it does just teach you intangibles. Like I didn't know how to cook. I knew how to eat spag bowl. I didn't know how to cook spag bowl. Let me tell you that for free.
Pot noodle vibes, boy.
I knew what vodka was. I didn't know how to drink the vodka, but no, don't listen to that. I'm not saying drink, but
little banner under the drink responsibly now.
You do a lot of growing up. Where do I want to take this now? So, as a freelancer in editorial, what would you say the most stressful aspect of what you do is?
Stressful. I mean, there is stress in that. I was thinking which parts of it.
What comes to mind?
What comes to mind straight away? With feedback and amends. You see so many memes online. I get so many memes because people know me, like design puns. I'm a sucker for that. But you get these memes of like, how many amends or feedback do you have to go? How many channels do you have to get of people saying, I don't like it. Why don't like it? I just don't like it. I don't know why. Those kind of elements. But something that I've learned, which it can be stressful, but you find ways of dealing with it, is respectfully challenging the client. And that comes sometimes with time. And that's more of a relationship that you build with the client, right? So they feel comfortable when that you are challenging them. It's not from a place of,
I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's from a, we want the best outcome.
Exactly that. And also, you've done pieces of work together in the past. You can, you've got credibility to show that you're good for it. And they trust you. And trust is, honest to God, like there's multiple things I say with freelancing, but trust is probably the biggest thing I would say, that when you've established trust between yourself and the client, there's an element of wanting to work more together, and you feel comfortable, and then you produce that something that both parties are proud of.
Is there, for the listener, is there anything that they can do to help establish that trust? Like, is it just produce good work? Is it showing up on time? Like, is there anything tangible?
There's something I've always said. It's the transparency of it all. So what I mean by that is, you occasionally sometimes get a client who, if they reach out to you, it's because they know what you can do. But sometimes they ask you to do other things. Now, if you're going to say, yeah, I can do it, but you really can't, and you find ways of trying to do it, and then you do it to a standard they're not happy with, you just made yourself look a bit silly, right? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to just say yes, be the yes person, right? And just, yes, creative, and say, I can do this, and you can't. And yeah, okay, sometimes being a freelance means we have to wing it a little bit, and that's the nature of it. But if there's something that you just don't feel comfortable in doing, don't do it. And I've had moments where, I've got a little bit of background in video and design and editing, but I'm not a videographer. I'm not a photographer. And I've got skills in it, but I wouldn't claim to be that. So rather than saying I can't do it, which I do say that, but also because I've got a lot of friends in these spaces, I can recommend. And you're still of value, you're still of use. I hate to put that value, but you know what I mean? Like, it feels like they're still getting something from you that you can share, and you're keeping it also in your creative space and community. So it's not like, sorry, I can't do it, go to the next person. You're suggesting something which hopefully that works, and you can still do some work with them, because also they realize, cool, I've asked Kieron, can he do something? He can't, because that's not what his strengths at. I know what his strengths are. I'm going to apply a project to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I've said it on the podcast before, but it can take like a lifetime to build trust, but just a moment to break the trust. So I think by being transparent, I just think it's a great takeaway. On the flip side, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
The most rewarding aspect? I mean, I don't know how many books that I will ever get to do in my lifetime, hopefully a lot more, but every piece of work that I do, I'm so proud to have it in hand. Like, there is an element of, like I said, I'm very much in editorial, making books. That's what I do for a living. And any piece of work that I've done, whether it's a small magazine or a hardback book, when I get that final thing, it's an accomplishment, right? Because it's a lot of energy and effort and time that's spent into making something. So I have like a little bookshelf at home. I have a studio, but I have my bookshelf at home as well. And, I have my books up that I've designed and made. And it feels nice. But more importantly, right, and I'm not going to be too cheesy now, there's an element of that. Obviously, because I have a small child now, when she's old enough that hopefully she can read some of this literature, it's something that I have made and crafted that she's able to physically have. Which, there'll be stuff online that she can watch, maybe Adobe if she does that, or hosting, but there's still something physical, do you know what I mean? That is tactile, which who knows what print will be in like 30 years time from now, right? Of how we see things and preserve it. But there's still elements that, I still have it and it's nice. So to answer your question, like I think having a physical thing in hand is the most rewarding element of being a freelancer, and in particular working on books. Okay,
I love it. It sounds like there's a lot that goes into the process. You mentioned the fact that you can get back so many amends. Do you have any productivity hacks?
Ooh, productivity hack. Do you know what? I'm making this all very doom and gloom when I was in my advertising days, but there was a lot of things I learned, especially from my head of design. And one thing was how you organize yourself in terms of like your hard drive or your system. Now, it's funny because I was with my mate just now in a co-working space, and she kind of had a look over my screen and saw my hard drive, how I organize it. I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to like things are folders within folders, inception, right? But it's because it was something that I was trained to do from quite young in terms of having things very organized, that if you then share another creative or another freelance or whatever, they can then go into it easily and work with it, because sometimes that's what you got to do when you share work. So a product hack is, at the time when you get a project, it might seem like it's a long thing to do, but just making sure your folders are set out, things that will make your life easier down the line in the project. To make sure things are very organized, clean, more streamlined as well. Because you never have to go back to an older version. You'd be surprised how many versions you do. Like, for example, the Still Breathing book, maybe that was version, I don't know, like 14. Because obviously you do different versions because of things that have happened. But if there was something that the client liked in version 6, if you've just been saving over the same one every single time, you have to recreate it again. So I'm not just saying have loads of versions, but you might have some, like, I always tend to do a new version when it's like a massive change. If it's like a small, change something, then that's crazy because you have like 100 versions, but, being sensible with it. But I tend to do that. So that's my kind of way of being productive and my kind of streamline of being like smart when it comes to organizing myself, when it comes to designing work.
As you spoke, I was just like, I need this hack because this podcast, I mean, if you saw my hard drive,
you hire me, I'll do your things.
My God, the files ain't filing. It's
Colour
B,
code,
it's B
colour
files,
code, bro.
not
Colour
X
code is
files.
real. Colour code
It's. I'm struggling. So to hear you say that, it's just made me think. Damn, I need to go home and.
It weren't always like that though, bro. It weren't always like that. And that's because very quick, if I go into a P, I remember I got stung once when my organisation wasn't on point as a junior designer, and we were trying to find a file. I was getting to print. Quite a big client as well. I won't say the name of the client, but it was a big client, and I couldn't find the version that I'd done. So we had to and let's just say it never got down too well with my head. So ever since then, I've just learned
You've learned
like the old Jamaican saying, if you know it, if you don't hear, you feel.
Yeah.
So, and that's not to advocate for anything, but it was more of like that mentality culturally that I was embedded growing up as a child, that, you know, you fool me once kind of thing, you know. Second time, it's like, no, I know what to look out for now.
I love it. As a freelancer, do you feel like you got a good work-life balance?
Yeah, that's the question. If you asked me this 11 months ago, I'd be like, because I think I'm still forever trying to find it sometimes. I have a system in place and it works, but it's always shifting. It's now, you know, reality's kicked in. I'm a dad now. I think not everything can always be so formulaic. And maybe that's healthy, because actually I used to live my life being, it's like this. If it's not like this, it's got to be that. But now, because you have realities of life, i.e. being a dad and whatnot, you have to learn to just be flexible, and you have to kind of go with the flow, which my wife is very good at, me not so much. But I'm learning to apply that flexibility in my actual life into how I am with my freelance world as well.
And you can answer this in any way you want. Are there any misconceptions about, like being a freelancer or about editorial, where just like people think it's like this, but they're just so wrong?
Do you know what the thing that hits me is the most? It's like, it might seem so, I want to say easy, but when you start name dropping loads of clients, like you mentioned obviously with the Adobe, D&AD, like, you know, I'm not naive, they're big clients, right? They're big names, but I think when you go online, you see so many creatives who are fairly established that have big names. You have to remember there was a point in their career where they never had this, and they started off however they did. And the key is that they're probably proactive. And I mean, that's the element. So I think it can be very easy to go online and assume it's glamorous. And freelancing is definitely more pros and cons, which is why I do it, right? I'm an advocate for freelance. But freelance is not for everyone. And I say that just because sometimes it can be lonely. Like, to be real, without being like the world's smallest violin, like it can be a lonely thing, because it depends on your setup. You know, I have a studio, which I desk share, but you are a bit of your own island. So when you are in a full-time, the positives being that you can work in a team, you can collaborate, you can share ideas. When you're freelance, it's literally yourself and the client occasionally, but it's yourself on screen, which I don't mind. I find a good sort of Spotify playlist. I'm good for it, but it's not for everyone. So I think there's elements of the misconceptions of what freelance could be like, but I would always suggest the best thing to do is to try both. If you go into freelance when you graduate, that's fine, but also give yourself space to maybe try full-time. And then you can make the decision of which one is more like me, rather than just going to freelance and think, I'm going to do it, or going to full-time and think, this is only me. You've got to try both and see what it's like.
I love it. You mentioned the fact that you're still trying to find like the balance. How is it you unwind?
How do I unwind? I think we touched on this even before we went on stream. Like, I used to play a lot of FIFA. I try. I used to be good at it. I used to be good in the past tense. I mean, I watch a lot of football. Yeah. I like a bit of football. I know when you came up today, you rocked up in your Man United top.
Oh, don't give it away.
I'm sorry, bro. I was like, I like it, but why you gotta do that? I'm an Arsenal fan. Come on now, next season. But yeah, I like to watch a lot of football. Nice. You know, with
who's gonna win the Euros?
Ooh.
This is going to have come out, so who's going to have won the Euros? That's the question.
Germany.
Ooh.
But my B team, because I can say this now, because my wife is Spanish and my daughter is half Spanish, Spain's my B team.
Okay.
But I would like to see England get to... Obviously, do I want them to win? Because if they win, we'll never shut up about it. That's the thing. And that's the sad thing about it. Like, if we do it, let's be humble about it. We're getting humbled right now. That's never happening.
We're singing this coming home.
We're getting humbled. But yeah, come on, England.
I love it. Yeah, so that's how you unwind. Kieron, where do you see yourself in the next 5 and 10 years, bro? This is the manifest corner.
Yeah.
Manifest it.
I see myself in the next 5-10 minutes, let alone. I would like to be in a space where I am still making books, but more so that I'm making publications which can generally have an impact on different communities, not just within London, but around the world, basically. Because that's why I got into what I do. That I'm able to create work and I'm able to see people have discussions as a result of it, and to be part of something bigger than just yourself, right? So that's what I'd love to be doing. But also, like, I love going to schools and unis and giving talks. Like, for me, it's nuts because, like I said, obviously freelancing it's cool, it's fun, there's great elements of it. It can be lonely, but when you're able to go back into unis and give talks and hear, more importantly, the thoughts and feedback from what students are actively in the space doing, it kind of keeps you, I won't say on trend, but it keeps you what's currently going on. Because let's be honest, like, when you're a freelancer, maybe in your 30s or 40s, whatever it is, you get set in your ways. We all do. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm not. We all do. And I think if you're tapped into what's currently going on, which can be down to yourself, or even just when you're able to go to unis and hear what's going on, it keeps you fresh. It keeps you, okay, people are now working with 3D print. Why would I not tap into? Do you know what I mean? So I feel like I would love to be still actively going in and giving talks, because things are changing and I'll learn for myself what's going on as well. So it's a learning curve for both sides. So I'd love to be doing that too.
I love it. I've got 2 more questions. So the first one just came off the back of what you just said there. Like, are there any emerging trends in your industry that you're noticing?
I mean, this is my Adobe Live host hat coming on. Obviously AI, right? The buzzword. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. How deep do we go? I mean, it's one of those things where I think that that's going to be, I mean, it already has taken off.
Are people's jobs at risk?
I wouldn't go that deep. I think it's something that, and I think it doesn't help when we have stuff in the media or even television shows like Black Mirror, which I love, by the way, but it heightens how extreme things could be. So that, I've got quite a personality. If I watch something, not that I believe it, of course not, but it's more like my brain starts to think, oh God, yeah, that could be a dystopian. Yeah. So when we have these things around us, it makes people think it could be believable, because obviously the inspirations come from somewhere. So to answer your question, I don't think it will take people's jobs, but I think it will make things easier. The thing that I wouldn't want to see is that it becomes a bit dormant or a bit lazy to it, because there's a lot of things out there which wasn't there when I was graduating, which is awesome and it makes life easier, but it would have skipped out a lot of work, and which is nice, but also the skipping out of work is part of process. So that is very important as well when you're going to creative.
You need to build the foundations. Like, you need to build solid foundations versus building it on sand. I get that. Yeah, makes sense. AI, we are hearing it, but it's good to hear that you don't think it's going to take our jobs. Just don't be lazy about it. My final question is, to the listener who's gotten to this point in the podcast, like, what would your final piece of advice be?
It's tricky. I think during the pandemic, if we're going to go back to free, that was a real turning point for a lot of people, right? Not just creators, but just everyone as a whole. And I think it made people realize what they want to be doing with their careers. And now we can look back at distant memory, right? It feels like a distant memory now. It really does. But I would say, and only because I went into freelance because of maybe that period of my life, understanding that when you're interested in something, you have to find a way of pursuing it. And that might take time, which is fine. You give yourself time, but actively make steps towards it. Someone, I can't remember what it was, I think it might have been the D&AD, and they had it on a panel discussion, but someone mentioned it, and they were saying the amount of hours, I don't know the statistics, but like the amount of hours we spend maybe watching certain platforms or whatever, which is fine because I do, but if you was channel energy into something you want to be doing, which obviously we might want to be watching stuff, but if you want to be doing something else, if you channel energy, you'll be surprised how much of productiveness you would have got in that space of a year. So that's quite shocking when you really break it down like that. So I think there's elements of, if you're listening thinking, do you know what, I kind of want to be an illustrator, or I kind of want to be a photographer or a graphic designer, but I don't really know how to go about doing it. Tap into someone who is actively doing it. Find out, what went wrong for them. Find out what went right for them. And then you kind of build a bit of an understanding yourself to then maybe make it work or collaborate. Just very quickly, I remember, and I never mentioned it, which I should do, it's super important. When I went freelance, I tapped into 2 friends of mine. And one guy in particular called James, who he used to be a freelancer in the agency that I was at. And I remember always seeing him being a freelancer coming in and thinking, right, okay, man, in a few years I want to be like what he's doing. And when I went freelance, I tapped him up and we had a Zoom call, and I was asking him about maybe like an hour's worth on a call. Still owe him that beer. But like, how do how is life as a freelance? And trying to get it from him firsthand, who's actively doing it. And that helped me in terms of what things I could be expecting along the way. Sounds obvious, but I remember him really jumping down to me, like the accountant stuff, like having an accountant, like understanding that. So tapping into people who you know, or finding people online and explaining to them.
Or podcasts.
Or podcasts, let's be honest. This one in particular. But no, in all seriousness, what you're doing is sick, because I've listened to a few and there's a lot of gems on there that makes people actively want to get out and do things. That's not me just plugging it, but for real, like actively doing it. And that's why we do what we do, right, on these podcasts.
100%. Kieron, this has been a sick convo. Are you ready for the quick fire round?
Yeah, man.
I'm drawing for the phone now.
Don't even think about it, just say
the time has come. I already know the answer to the first one, but I'm doing it anyway. Design for print or digital?
For print.
Money or happiness?
Happiness.
New clients consistently or repeat clients?
Repeat.
Ooh. High budget corporate project or low budget indie project?
Low.
Okay.
It's wild to say that.
Work from home or work from the office?
Office.
Would you rather travel to the past or future?
Damn. Past.
Who has it easier, men or women?
You can't ask me that question. Bro, who has it easier? Men.
Love it. Dream dinner guest.
Dream dinner guest would be... My God. Kendrick.
And I'm throwing in a bonus one here. If you could, freelance for a client, an organization, who would your dream client or organization be?
My current clients now. Okay, who's this guy? Who would it be? Do you know I've always wanted to work with Innocent Smoothie?
Oh.
I did my dissertation on them at uni. I went to the HQ and I remember thinking the mindset, the philosophy, everything they do as a brand is on point. Yeah. And I've always appreciated that. So if anyone's listening up, boom.
Hey.
And reports, publications, hit me up, man.
Oh, if you get into his DMs, that must be a little Kieron, this has been such a sick conversation. We do have a closing tradition on this podcast. Knowing everything you know now and with everything you've been through, what advice would you give your younger self, and would you still be doing the same thing?
The first question, I would be still doing the same thing, I would think. Advice, try not to overthink. Try not to overthink too many things. I did that a lot. Maybe I want to be where I'm at, I guess, now, but I probably wouldn't have as much stress and maybe less grey hairs. So try to overthink, because it will turn out the way it should.
Love it. Kieron, before we go today, bro, like where can people find you? Do you want to plug some socials?
Yeah. You can catch me on KieronLewis.com, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on that at Kieron_Lewis. On there you'll see projects, you'll see work, you'll see some of my Adobe Lives I've done as well. And that's me.
That's it, Kieron. This has been such a sick conversation.
Pleasure,
I've enjoyed it. Have you enjoyed it?
I've enjoyed it, bro. It's been a blast. Thank you.
I love that. And to the listener, if you've gotten to this point of the episode, you know what to do. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, comment. Let us know who you want to hear from next. This has been another episode of What My Best Friend Does. If you didn't know, now you know. Over and out.